The All Blacks have the match up against England this weekend, their 3rd November international, and currently sitting 2 wins from 2 for the first half of their November internationals. And in this video, I will be trying to predict Scott Robertson's lineup to go head-to-head with England. Now, the English have already announced their lineup going very early for this matchup, so we already know who is taken to the field for the English side. But now the questions for Scott Robertson around returns of certain players, injuries of others. We'll see whether or not we can get close to his 23-man side. But jumping straight into it, front row, I really don't think we're going to see any surprises whatsoever here. Number 1, Ethan de Groot. Number 2, Cody Taylor. And number 3, Fletcher Null. Now, this front row in the first game up against Ireland, they had some parts of their game they were doing extremely well. One part that was lacking for the All Blacks was line-out time, but Cody Taylor a lot better in the game up against Scotland, and he is still the first-choice hooker. Tolkiaho's made some great impact off the bench, and I do see that being exactly where Scott Robertson leaves him. But de Groot and Fletcher Null, there are questions around the scrum a little bit at times for the ABs, but I still think that because of that massive impact that the 3 men off the bench with all the size that they offer can bring, they'll still go with this same front row for this contest. On to the locking duo. This is where I believe we will see the injury return of Scott Barrett. He has been coming along nicely with his leg laceration. It did make him miss the game up against Scotland, but I am putting Scott Barrett as my predicted number 4. Now, I have to say Josh Lord filled in that role very nicely. In fact, he played a lot better in that game up against Scotland than many thought that he would. So I feel like that's a great sign for New Zealand. The fact that even with a Barrett injury, as well as Patrick Tuipulotu being out and a few of those other fringe guys also injured at the moment, they can still put together a pretty strong lock and duo. But Barrett would be returning and he would be captain at 4, and Fabian Holland, he would be keeping his spot as the number 5. He has been a standout for New Zealand all throughout the year, and we are getting very close to those Breakthrough Player of the Year nominations. Absolutely love to see Fabian Holland's name on that list. Moving on to the loose forward trio. We did see Simon Parker take a bit of a head knock in the game up against the Irish. Luke Jacobson, he is ruled out with a concussion that he did pick up in the All Blacks 15 game. So he is unavailable for this match. Summer Penifine, he has actually returned to New Zealand, I believe, due to family health issues. So because of that, we've seen Christian Leo Willie. He has been called up into the squad as injury cover, but I don't think we're going to see him feature in this contest. I'm going number 6, Simon Parker, returning from his head knock up against Ireland. Number 7, Artie Savia, and number 8, Peter Larkai. Now, I have a few reasons why I feel like they may look back in the direction of Simon Parker here. For one, the English are going with that 6-2 split off of the bench, and I do feel like someone like Wallace Satiti, we saw how impactful he was in the match up against Ireland from the reserves, so I do think that is a very smart option for Scott Robertson. There's no denying that Satiti would be extremely busy in the starting lineup as well. Simon Parker offering that little bit more height and size, so up against a physical English fullback, that also makes sense as to why Razor would go in that direction. But the other option is to go with Peter Larkai off the bench and maybe put Satiti in the 8 jersey. That way you've got him competing up against Ben Earl, which could be a great head-to-head, but overall I think we're going to see just the one change in this loose forward trio. Moving on to the 9-10 combination. This is somewhere that we've seen quite a few people asking to see a change at 10. Number 9, I believe they will be sticking with Cam Roigard, once again showing exactly how dangerous he can be. And number 10, I think they're sticking with Beauden Barrett. Whether people want to see McKenzie or Ruben Love in the starting lineup at this point in time doesn't seem to faze Scott Robertson. The impact that Damian McKenzie has been able to bring off of the bench has completely changed the way that the All Blacks have been able to play the last 20 minutes of their contest. Now, all throughout the Rugby Championship and also the matches prior to that in July, we didn't see that from New Zealand. In fact, you could almost argue under the whole Scott Robertson era of coaching, we haven't really seen New Zealand close out matches the way that they used to, which is why with McKenzie doing so well off the bench, I don't think they're going to break the formula. And I do think they'll try and make the bench as close to what we saw in that match up against Ireland as possible, just because of that 6-2 split of the English, trying to finish the match well. They've got Marcus Smith off the bench for England, also Henry Pollock, Tom Curry, Chandler Cunningham himself, so you do really need some guys who are great at finishing games. So that is why starting Cam Roigard and Beauden Barrett may not be a mile away from what Razor does. But moving on to the midfield combination, this is where I believe we will see number 12 Quintal Paia and number 13 Billy Proctor. Leicester Fainanuku starting at 13 last week up against the Scottish alongside Quintal Paia in the centre pairing, but we have heard the injury of Caleb Clark. He is out with a concussion, won't be playing in this match up against England out on the left wing. So they've got a few options of being able to fill that gap, whether that's a Leicester, a Rico, a Sevu, or maybe even a Caleb Tangi-Tau, now that he is in the squad as injury cover. But I do believe that Billy Proctor to 13, something that Scott Robertson would do, and we've got to remember this is a combination in Tupaia and Proctor that we haven't really seen. All throughout the time where Proctor has been struggling, he's had Geordie Barrett as that number 12 on the inside. And I'm not saying that that is why he was struggling, but there is also the argument that could be made that perhaps giving him a new midfield combination partner could actually favour Billy Proctor in some regards as well. Moving on to the back three, though, this is where I have got number 11, Leicester Fainanuku. I think that Scott Robertson may go back to what we did see in the Rugby Championship, which was that last game up against Australia, Leicester getting that chance. Now, another statistic that stood out a little bit for Leicester Fainanuku's game up against the Scottish was the 7 missed tackles. Proctor, the most that I've seen for him missed throughout a game is about 2 or 3. Now, Rieko Ioane, I actually think has a very good shot of being selected out on the left wing, but at the same time, because Proctor made his way off the bench, I just feel like this one makes a little bit more sense than going back to Ioane. But at the end of the day, it is Scott Robertson. He has got certain players that he does favour that little bit more. So that is why Ioane or Sevu Reece find themselves out on the left. But I've gone with Leicester there. Number 14, once again, going with Leroy Carter. Got himself that yellow card up against Scotland for a foot trip. So I'd like to think he wouldn't be doing that again. He would have learned his lesson from that one. And then number 15, this is where I think we will once again see Will Jordan now up against the English, particularly with George Ford as that number 10, and the fact that Freddie Stewart comes back in at 15, that tells me straight away we're going to see some sort of aerial battle from the English, as Freddie Stewart's normally known for being that pretty safe option under the high ball, and Will Jordan has been going better and better under the high ball over the last few weeks, so I think Scott Robertson would stick him straight back in as that number 15 here. But moving on to the bench, I mentioned how this is the game that you want that bench looking as similar as it can to that match up against the Irish. So number 16, Samisoni Taukei'aho, number 17, Tamaiti Williams, and number 18, Basilio Tossi. Now, some have argued that Tossi has done enough to get himself a starting spot with the impact that he's been able to bring off the bench, but I do love the extra size that Tossi, Williams, as well as Taukei'aho offer as the bench replacements going up against Luke Cowan, Dickey, Alice Genge, and also Will Stewart. So that is pretty much a starting front row for the English. So you do need that size, and those scrums later on could be absolutely crucial. Taukei'aho has proven to be quite the impact player. Hasn't really had a huge amount of starts, but I don't think that will annoy him too much, seeing as he does still get a pretty decent run off of the bench. Number 19, this is where I think they will select Josh Lord. Now, Sam Derry didn't really get a huge amount of time to prove what he could do off the bench up against Scotland. Josh Lord started well, so I can see him going straight back to the bench for this contest, because he also did have a very strong game up against Ireland when he made his way off the bench early on for the injury of Scott Barrett. Number 20, Wallace Satiti. Like I mentioned, the kind of player you want later on in a game as fresh as possible, coming on up against multiple of the English loose forward replacements. Satiti absolutely loves getting in those breakdowns, running the ball hard. Could be a real impact player for the All Blacks here. Number 21, Cortez Ratama. Number 22, this is where I do think we're going to see Rieko Ioane. Mentioned how some would like to see him in the starting lineup, but I do think that off of the bench for Rieko could be the perfect position to be able to play him. He could come on at 13. He could come on as that number 11. The other option is to go with Fainanuku as the 22 and have Rieko starting on the left wing side, but I do think either way, they are the two that we're going to see jockeying for that number 11 jersey. Unless, of course, Rieko goes left, Leicester goes centre, and then Billy Proctor once again makes his way from the bench. And then number 23, the man of the match from last contest, Damian McKenzie. He had a real impact when he made his way onto the park, as he seems to always do for the All Blacks at this point in time. So I just don't see Scott Robertson changing that. Yes, Beauden Barrett's form's been up and down, but if you can still have that safety net of Damian McKenzie making his way onto the field and helping win games for New Zealand, I think that's exactly what we'll see from Razor for this game at Twickenham. But nonetheless, the All Blacks, if it is like last week, the lineup will be announced on Thursday night, New Zealand time. We will be doing a video on the channel as soon as it comes out, so be sure to check that out. But thank you all very much for tuning in. Do let me know who you think Scott Robertson will be selecting in his All Blacks lineup, and I will see you all for the next one.